Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be talking more about the Alex Murdaugh trial. We're going to be looking at him providing testimony with his own defense. We're going to be looking at the body cam footage from the night of the murders. There's some really interesting stuff in that one. And we're going to be looking at Buster Murdaugh's testimony. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I got lots more content about this coming out. All right, let's get started. So we call this lip shrinking. The testimony hasn't actually even begun yet. So it's very interesting that right before the testimony begins, he does this. And the first questions he gets asked, which I assume he knew were coming, is about whether or not he actually did this. So I think it's very telling and very interesting that lip shrinking, doing this, suggesting he doesn't want to say something, comes right before answering some very hard-hitting questions.
Mr. Murdaugh, on June 7th, 2021, did you take this gun or any gun like it and shoot your son Paul in the chest in the feed room at your property off Moselle Road?
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh.
Now, you may have noticed if you watched my last video, and I'm not going to spend the whole video talking about this, but you'll notice he's nodding his head again. He's saying, no, I did not, and instead of doing this, he is nodding his head. He does it a couple of times. We'll review it and watch it just so you can see it, but we're not going to go through this a whole bunch of times throughout the video because I already covered that.
At your property off Moselle Road.
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh, did you take this gun or any gun like it and blow your son's brains out on June 7th or any day or any time?
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh.
The intensity of his stare is very interesting. We see this oftentimes with psychopaths. They stare because when they want somebody to believe something they're saying, when they want somebody to believe something that's not true, they will stare them down, they will intimidate them. Now, I know he's talking to his own defense, but I think that he wants us to believe so badly that he is just staring through everyone. He does this throughout the trial. This is not specific to this situation, but just keep watching.
If you take a 300 blackout, such as this, and fire it into your wife Maggie's, all were murdered.
It is.
Were you, in fact, at the kennels at 8:44 p.m. on the night Maggie and Paul were murdered?
I was.
One thing I want you to notice about his body language right now. Now, last time I pointed out how he tries to look small and tries to shrink down some. Look at how little he's moving his hands and how little he's moving his body. He nods his head, obviously. I pointed that out. But his body is very still. And when people do this, oftentimes we associate it with trying to hide. Because if you think about this, imagine that there's a predator out in the wild. The first thing you're going to do is to be as still as possible. And I think that right now he's trying to not be noticed. So I think that he's sitting very still, very intentionally, because we're going to see a contrast of that that's very, very different.
Did you lie to Alex? Why did you lie to Agent Owen, Agent Croft, and Deputy Rutland about the last time you saw Maggie and Paul?
As my addiction evolved over time, I would get in these.
So we're already seeing a different type of body language from this question. So in this question, he was asking about why he lied. And he's going to have to craft a story now. And he's used to having an audience. He's an attorney, so this is not something new to him. So you're going to see different body language now than you did when he was being asked very direct questions about whether or not he committed murders. He was asked why he lied, and now he gets to tell a story. He's in control of what he's going to say. He now has the floor. So you're going to see the body language changes.
These situations or circumstances where I would get paranoid thinking. It could be anything that triggered it. It might be a look somebody gave me. It might be a reaction somebody had to something I did. It might be a policeman following me in a car. That night, June 7th.
So as you can see, he was much more animated. He used his hands to talk. He had more facial expressions. It felt more natural. And that's what we see when he is trying to craft a story.
After finding Mags and Paul, don't talk to anybody without Danny with you. All my partners were just repeatedly telling me that. I had a deputy sheriff taking gunshot test from my hands. I'm sitting in a police car with David Owen asking me about my relationship with my wife and my son. And all those things coupled together after finding them, coupled with my distrust for SLED, caused me to have paranoid thoughts.
So he's accepting zero responsibility so far. So it's the substances, it's the partners from, I presume, his practice, because he said my partners, and I would guess he's talking about other attorneys. They told him not to talk to anybody. And now it's because he's got an officer questioning him. And so all of those things are what caused him to lie, not because he has any personal responsibility in it whatsoever.
Between the console and the seat where you couldn't get to it.
Were you, during that minute or however long it was, were you disposing of murder weapons, Alex?
No.
So this is interesting, and I'm going to point this out to Evans 3 times. Now, I'm actually not talking about Alex Murdaugh right now. I want to go back. We're going to talk about his attorney for a second. Just an observation. There are 3 times when he talks about getting rid of clothes, or the clothes that he was wearing, where his attorney has his arms crossed. Now, having your arms crossed is oftentimes a sign of just wanting to be comfortable, but it can also be a way to close your body off if something it makes you uncomfortable, or if there's something that you don't like. Now, I'm not saying for sure that he doesn't like having to ask these questions, or that he has any particular feeling about them, but there is a pattern. Generally, throughout the trial, he talks with his arms open, he uses his hands, but in 3 of the instances when he's talking about the clothes that he was wearing, or whether or not he disposed of clothes or whatever, his arms are crossed. I'm going to point those out. Just thought you might be interested.
However long it was, were you disposing of murder weapons, Alex?
No.
Were you disposing of bloody clothes?
No. Had on athletic shorts and a t-shirt.
Sure. And other people have talked about this. I'm not going to repeat it, but where did you spend the...
And here's the second time that happens. I just wanted to point that out.
During that meeting, did they show you the Snapchat video of you trying to stand up the fruit tree?
Yes.
And were you questioned about what clothing you were wearing?
And I can't...
So I know we're here to talk about Alex Murdaugh and not his attorney, but I wanted to point out there were 3 different instances where he crossed his arms when they were talking about the clothes. I don't know if he feels like that's a weak point in the defense. I'm not sure why he has his arms crossed, and maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it just happens to be that timing-wise that's just sort of how it worked out. I don't know. But I just wanted to point it out because I like pointing out changes in behavior, and I thought this was sort of an interesting thing to point out.
I mean, you couldn't believe it. You couldn't believe it. It was so over the top. Truthfully, we didn't think anything about it. I mean, it was just so crazy.
So now he's talking about his family getting threats on social media. And you're going to see his face showing anger. You're starting to see it build. He's actually feeling angry, just thinking about his family getting threats on social media, that people would be saying these things. Let's watch a little bit more, because I want you to get a chance to really see the anger. There's a point to this, so just hold on.
That, you know, we just, I mean, people talking about what he was going to get and how they were going to do this and get him, and I mean, it's stuff you really, I mean,
So you get a chance to see this furrowed brow, the anger on his face. When he's thinking about this, he's feeling it and he's showing it. So I do believe he's feeling angry right now. But what's interesting is if we contrast that to when he's hearing the night where his family was murdered, you're not seeing any sadness on his face. Let's jump back and look at that again just so you can contrast the two.
47 Mobile Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and sir, give me the address again.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay, how did they shoot?
Alan, when you say I've been up to it now, and it's...
So obviously there's times where he cries and he emotes some, but the expression on his face, you're not seeing sadness when they're talking about such a traumatic night, when they're taking him right back there. Just talking about social media and people saying mean things on social media makes him angry. He can get in touch with that right then. But going back to the night of his family's murder, and he shows nothing right now. And I think that's very interesting. So now we're going to look at some body cam footage from the night of the murders. Let's see if anything stands out.
It's bad. It's bad. Check the pulses.
Yes, sir. This is the firearm you brought from inside the house?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I went and got. This is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck a few months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious.
Okay.
You know, he's been getting like punched. I know that's somebody. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did you get?
So this is already the first thing that stands out as a little bit strange. He's trying to go ahead and establish why he thinks it happened. And he's showing some vague emotion in the background, but it seems to it's more important that he gets this story across to the police officer. I'd be curious if there's any law enforcement that would disagree and feels like this is pretty typical. As someone who works with trauma, I would be shocked that someone would be reacting in this way right after what he is alleged to have seen.
When did you get home? Right when you called, or did you go to the house first? Where is the house?
I came to the house first. My mom has late stages Alzheimer's, and my dad is in the hospital.
Okay.
I left. I don't know what time. I can go back on my phone and tell you the exact times. Did you check?
Okay. Did I check what?
Did you check them?
We got medical.
Okay, so he was asking about the time. The police officer asked about the time. And then he started to explain it. And then he asked, did you check? And I believe that he was saying, did you check on the time? I think that's what he was referring to. So I think that he was trying to ask the police officer if they knew what time and if he had checked on it. And when the police officer affirmed that he wasn't clear on what he was asking, then I think he switched it to, did you check if my wife and son are dead? I think that that's what happened there. Let's go back and rewatch it one more time.
I know that's somebody. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did you get home? Right when you called, or did you go to the house first? Where is the house?
I came to the house first. My mom has late stages Alzheimer's, and my dad is in the hospital.
Okay.
I left. I don't know what time. I can go back on my phone and tell you the exact times. Did you check?
Okay. Did I check what?
Did you check them?
We got medical guys that are that's what they're gonna do. Okay.
Because the question, did you check them, doesn't really make any sense in that context. And I know sometimes when people are going through trauma, you don't necessarily say things that make sense. You know, there's nothing shocking about acting a little unusual. But the fact is that they were talking about specific details that later on became an issue for him. And so I think that he was feeling him out and then changed what he was talking about.
I believe that's it.
You think that's the only one? Okay.
I'm 99%.
Do you normally
certain that's
have
right.
any other firearms in your vehicle?
I don't, but
Okay.
occasionally there's a pistol in there.
Okay.
It's striking how remarkably calm he is in this moment. And I just want to point that out. Once again, it's not that there's a right or wrong way to grieve or to mourn or to react from trauma, but this is highly unusual. The level of calm that he is already regaining and the way he's able to talk so conversationally about this right now.
Okay, they've already checked them.
They did check them?
Yes, sir.
It's official that they're dead?
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
I can't be the only one that reacts this way to this. The idea that he said, is it official that they're dead? Once again, people can act strangely, and I think whether he'd murdered somebody or just found his family dead, people are going to act strangely on a night like that. But is it official that they're dead? That seems like such an odd way to state this.
I'm sorry.
No.
How you doing?
What's her birthday?
9/15.
I also think that how you doing is really interesting. I don't know if it was an officer or a medical professional or somebody who passed by, but that sort of casual how you doing also seems a little bit odd in context. So I just wanted to point out a couple of quick things from this. The strangest thing to me was his interaction with the officer when the officer had asked about time, and then he started rambling and then changed the subject. I believe that that was an attempt at deflection, but a very subtle and very skilled one.
I go by Buster.
So now we're going to do just a couple of minutes of Buster's testimony. I'm not going to cover a whole lot of it, but there are a couple of things I thought y'all might find interesting.
I really don't know.
I don't either. But the packages would come to, you said the kennel.
So something I want to point out that he just did is he licks the inside of his lips. like that. And cross-examination is just starting at this point, and he's probably not used to doing this a whole lot, so I would assume that's just a normal reaction to anxiety. I'm not going to overinterpret that, but I at least wanted to point out, for some people that could be a normal behavior, certainly at the start of something like this, because it is a nerve-wracking thing to go through.
Side.
They would come to the shed.
Right.
Yes, sir. He would.
Was there ever any violence in the family?
No, sir.
I want you to look at that again. What's interesting is that he, not so much his tongue sticking out right there, actually, it's him doing this, which sometimes can be an attempt not to say something, or it can just be a way to try to make yourself feel calmer. But I want to look at that again in the context of a question asking, has there ever been violence in your family? Which is a very broad question, really.
He would.
Was there ever any violence in the family?
No, sir.
Once again, just pay attention to those kinds of subtle movements. I don't want to overread anything. I don't want to say this definitely means something, but it's always important to note changes in behavior and to try to figure out what does that mean.
Played of an interview with your dad on June 10th.
Yes, sir.
And there was a question about whether your dad said, I did him so bad.
So we've talked about lip shrinking. See, he's hiding his lips. Oftentimes that is associated with not wanting to talk about something. So I can't speak as to why he wouldn't want to talk about this, or that that's definitely what he's feeling, but that's what it's oftentimes associated with.
Bad, or they did him so bad. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize your dad's voice?
I do.
If you listen to it, would you be able
Please unlock the door. We'd like to come in.
Had you ever been over there at 6:30 in the morning?
Have I ever been out there at 6:30 in the morning? 6:30 in the morning?
So if you see this facial expression right here, emotions are what we call bilateral, except for one, and I'll explain what this means. So when we have genuine emotions, you see them on both sides of the face. So for example, if you're happy, you see a smile on both sides, not one side, barring any sort of physical limitations. Frown, both sides. Anger, same thing. But all emotions except for contempt are on both sides of the face. So I would think that it's very possible that he doesn't like these questions. He doesn't like being asked this stuff. To me, that is a contemptuous look.
Just like overall, no, sir.
Now, if you look at his body posture, the sort of hand on his leg, trying to take up space, I believe that this is an attempt to show confidence. Because in essence, the more space that we take up, the more confident, more dominant we appear. It's the same reason that if you think of a police officer standing with his hands on his hips, or her hips, legs farther apart, and in other words, they take up more space, they're meant to appear dominant, which is understandable given the job of being in law enforcement. But when people do it, oftentimes it's an attempt to appear confident or an attempt to dominate in order to be more believable. So it's interesting to me that he takes this stance. Now, it's possible that he's doing this so that he can look at a monitor. I'm not saying that there's not other reasons for it, but I do think this is an interesting position for him to have held so much throughout this testimony. So if there's other things specifically about the testimony from Buster that you guys would like me to evaluate, please let me know. I really appreciate all the comments everybody's been making. I read them all. They're very helpful. They're helping guide what I'm going to look at on other videos. So just so you know, I read every single comment. I may not reply to them all, but I read every single one. So please let me know what you think. If there's more stuff that you want to see, please let me know. And if you want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe. Okay, thanks for watching.